is a wide receiver I like, but what is he doing here? Why are we taking him this high in the draft? Okay, I thought he would go late round one. I was hoping that Jahan Dotson went to the Green Bay Packers, went to the Kansas City Chiefs. Neither ends up happening because Washington takes him in the middle of round one. Now, I think Washington was desperate for a wide receiver. I mean, Washington most likely was really hoping that they ended up walking away with a Drake London, with a Garrett Wilson. Obviously, that was the dream. And I will say, this acquisition is going to help this offense, no question. If you look at Jahan Dotson, a lot of people want to compare him to a player like Tyler Lockett. And if that turns out to be true, oh my God, that's exactly what this team needs, because with Terry McLaurin, he's a great wide receiver one. But the issue is when you're running Terry McLaurin alongside legitimately nobody, you tried replacing him with Dimey Brown last year. That's just not going to work out. And with Jahan Dotson, he does have red flags on his profile, but those red flags are actually explainable. This is something I got wrong at the very beginning of the offseason when we looked at his profile from afar until we dove a little bit deeper in on it. Because if we go over and we check out Jahan Dotson, well, yeah, he did absolutely nothing his first 2 years at Penn State. I mean, his second season at Penn State, he was okay, but he didn't break out. He didn't have over 20% of his receiving production on a per game basis in that offense. But we have an explanation for this. And y'all know one wide receiver that I really like that one day I hope he gets a shot in the NFL is KJ Hamler. Well, KJ Hamler and Pat Frymuth were both at Penn State, and that did not allow Jahan Dotson to have that truly elite breakout until his junior season, where once KJ Hamler was drafted, once KJ Hamler was off this team, Hamler was a second-round pick to the Denver Broncos back in 2020. But when he was off this team, you actually have, all of a sudden, Jahan Dotson coming out and dominating with over 40% of the receiving production in this offense in back-to-back seasons at Penn State. That's fantastic. Now, of course, there are red flags on his profile. I'll talk about some of the historical comparisons. The red flags, as we've already mentioned, didn't break out until his junior season. And on top of that, he stayed all 4 years at Penn State. And I will say, I know a lot of people want to give the excuses for these players like Jahan Dotson. Oh, he stayed all 4 years at Penn State because of COVID. No, that excuse isn't valid. As we've already said, yes, you can use that excuse for someone like Christian Watson at North Dakota State. I mean, he actually didn't get to play his junior season until the spring. If you're playing spring ball your junior year for your main season because you play in such a small conference, sure, we're going to give it to you. However, with Jahan Dotson, that's not going to be the case. And with Dotson as well, if we're talking about a fantasy football perspective, I don't love this landing spot. It's funny because he's probably actually going to move higher in our overall rankings because the draft capital that he received is going to give him a higher grade overall. However, if we're looking at the landing spot, he's never going to be able to overcome Terry McLaurin as the wide receiver one in Washington. And at the same time, while this is going to be a good NFL team, they play in an easy conference. And on top of this, they obviously have a very, very good defense. The issue with Jahan Dotson is this passing offense is just not it. The passing volume's not going to be here in Washington. You have Carson Wentz, and with this team, we can imagine they probably want to just kind of handicap Carson Wentz, tell him to go out there and say, hey, play the game. Don't lose us the game. We're going to try to win with our defense. We can imagine that's how this game plan is going to go, and that's not going to be a great thing for Jahan Dotson's actual fantasy production. I'll say I think this helps Washington from a real-life perspective. I think this dramatically helps Terry McLaurin's efficiency from a real-life perspective. Now, I will say, if you go back and you look at Terry McLaurin's market share numbers since 2019, they're ridiculous. Terry McLaurin's closing in on getting about 30% of Washington's targets on a per-game basis. That's unbelievable. That's like almost Devontae Adams level. But the thing with Terry McLaurin is he's competing for nobody with targets. We thought he was going to have a wide receiver 2 this past season with Curtis Samuel. Curtis Samuel wasn't able to stay healthy with the groin injury. So Terry McLaurin has never had target competition in Washington. His biggest target competition has been Logan Thomas and J.D. McKissic. So yes, the target share is going to come down. I will say the efficiency comes up. Like we said, I wanted to be selling those guys like Elijah Moore, like Terry McLaurin before the NFL draft because you get Dotson coming here, and instead of someone like Drake London, I actually think that most people in their actual rankings aren't going to be moving Terry McLaurin down as much as they would have otherwise. Like if we go over to Underdog Fantasy, we're always going to say this. Underdog Fantasy just launched that $10 million fantasy football contest, Best Ball Mania 3. And of course, that's not all the first place. It's all down the line, but $25 buy-in. And they have so many other contests going on. So please make sure you go sign up with promo code FLOCK. And when you use promo code FLOCK, you'll get a 100% deposit match. And on top of that, you'll get our rookie rankings, our startup rankings, our dynasty research book, a ton of stuff going on over there. But let's check where they currently have the ADP for Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, oh my God. I was getting ready to tell you to avoid drafting Terry McLaurin. But Terry McLaurin in these drafts right now is going behind Michael Pittman and Courtland Sutton and right ahead of Allen Robinson. I was fully prepared to tell you, hell, we're avoiding Terry McLaurin, move him down, we're not drafting this. I probably still prefer Terry McLaurin over Courtland Sutton. Like, I guess Terry McLaurin is a fine draft pick. He's going around the 6th round in these drafts. Yeah, you could take Terry McLaurin. Let me check out where Jahan Dotson is going and where we'd be moving Jahan Dotson. Oh, Dotson has to fly up this list. He was going as the wide receiver 67 behind McCole Hardman, Jamison Crowder, Corey Davis, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Devontae Parker, Will Fuller, DJ Chark, Tim Patrick, George Pickens, Jacoby Myers, Sky Moore, Kenny Golladay, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Tyler Boyd, Jameson Williams. Like, who do you prefer right now? Not from a dynasty perspective. I think everybody probably still prefers Jameson Williams. But if we're talking just from a redraft perspective, would Jameson Williams going over to Detroit? I think Jameson Williams is so much better than Jahan Dotson. I can't say that they are the same. You still probably prefer Jameson Williams. But Jahan Dotson's definitely the wide receiver right after that Chris Olave and Jameson Williams tier. Jahan Dotson has to jump over George Pickens. Jahan Dotson has to jump over Christian Watson, even though we already had him ahead of those players in our rankings. You know we did. But nonetheless, of course, thank you all so much for checking out the live stream. Please go down there, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. We'll be live again in just 1 second. Go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. Support this channel. Go have some fun.